Before Siri, before ChatGPT, before the machines learned to speak, there were rooms full of researchers who believed that human intelligence could one day be replicated by a machine, and some of the most powerful institutions in America believed them enough to fund it. What most people don't know is that AI wasn't born inside Silicon Valley. It was born during the Cold War, funded by governments, driven by military competition, and shaped by decades of failures that almost killed the field entirely. The story of how we got from there to here is one that very few people have ever been told in full. It's 1950. The Korean War has just broken out. Washington is gripped by Cold War anxiety, and somewhere inside a quiet office at Princeton, a mathematician named Alan Turing has just published something that will quietly change everything. His paper asks one question, simple on the surface, profound underneath. Can machines think? Nobody had a clear answer, but a handful of American researchers, backed by some of the country's most influential institutions, were about to spend the next 7 decades trying to find one. What they built along the way would reshape civilization, and much of it happened far from public attention. Summer 1956, a small group of scientists gather at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. No press coverage, no public announcement, fewer than 20 people in the room, and yet what is decided inside that building becomes one of the most consequential meetings in modern history. They give a name to what they are pursuing. They call it artificial intelligence. And from that moment, an entirely new field of science is born. Among them is John McCarthy, the man who coins the term, Marvin Minsky, who will go on to advise presidents and institutions for decades. These are not fringe thinkers. These are some of the most respected scientists in Cold War America, and they have the attention of the US government, which had become one of AI research's biggest early funders. The question driving everyone in that room isn't academic, it is strategic. Whoever advances this technology first holds a significant edge in an increasingly competitive world. Through the 1960s, DARPA, the Pentagon's research and development arm, channels tens of millions of dollars into AI laboratories inside American universities. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. The goals are ambitious. Machines that could process and translate foreign communications, analyze reconnaissance imagery, and assist in complex decision-making faster than any human analyst. The investment is significant, deliberate, and largely conducted outside of public conversation. But what happened next surprised nearly everyone who had believed in the promise. By the mid-1970s, progress stalls. The machines perform well inside controlled laboratory conditions. In the real world, messy, unpredictable, full of context and nuance, they fall short consistently. Congressional support erodes, funding is cut, the scientific community grows divided, and the optimism that had defined the field's first 2 decades fades into what researchers would later call the AI winter. A long, difficult period of reduced expectations and institutional disillusionment. The labs scale back. The public, who had barely followed the field to begin with, moves on. But the researchers who had spent their careers on this idea don't walk away. They reduce their ambitions, refine their methods, and keep working quietly, steadily, convinced that the foundation they are laying will eventually matter. 1986. A researcher named Geoffrey Hinton publishes a paper that receives little attention outside a narrow academic circle. It describes a new approach to machine learning, one that doesn't rely on programming explicit rules, but instead exposes the system to large amounts of data and allows it to identify patterns over time. The technique is called backpropagation. It seems at the time like a technical refinement. It turns out to be one of the most important ideas in the history of computing. Through the 1990s, AI returns to everyday life, not dramatically, but quietly, embedded in systems most people never think about. The spam filter sorting your inbox, the fraud detection running in the background at your bank, the early search algorithm that Google is refining inside a rented garage in Menlo Park. None of it announces itself as artificial intelligence. But the infrastructure for something far larger is being assembled piece by piece by people who can already see where the trajectory leads. And then comes the data. The internet doesn't just connect the world, it creates the largest accumulation of human-generated information in history. Billions of photographs, trillions of written words, every search, every click, every sentence typed into a browser. All of it becomes training material for systems learning to see, to read, and to understand language. By 2012, a research team at the University of Toronto demonstrates an AI system that can identify objects in photographs with an accuracy that surpasses human performance. The margin is not close, and researchers who understand the implications of that result begin to think very carefully about what comes next. The AI winter is over. What follows is not simply a recovery. It is an acceleration unlike anything the field has seen before. Inside Silicon Valley, investment in AI intensifies rapidly. Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon begin acquiring AI research teams and building internal labs at a scale that has no historical precedent. The announcements are measured, the ambitions are not. These companies understand earlier than most governments and regulators, that AI is not simply another software category, it is infrastructure, and whoever builds the most capable version of it earliest will hold an advantage that is genuinely difficult to overstate. Many of the most critical developments during this period happen far from public attention, inside research divisions with limited external visibility, producing results that are shared selectively and deployed quietly. This is not unusual in a competitive technology industry, but it does mean that by the time the public begins to understand what has been built, it is already deeply woven into the systems they use every day. By 2020, language models have become capable enough to produce extended written text, essays, legal summaries, medical notes, news articles, at a quality that trained readers often cannot distinguish from human writing. A system called GPT-3, developed by OpenAI, demonstrates this in ways that are difficult to ignore. The company releases access carefully, monitoring responses, studying what the technology does in the hands of real users. Researchers working closest to these systems begin to ask harder questions, not just about capability, but about consequence. The answers are not simple, and within the research community, there is no consensus. Then comes November 30th, 2022. OpenAI releases ChatGPT to the public. 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million within 2 months, the fastest adoption of any consumer application ever recorded. A technology that had been developing steadily for 7 decades becomes, in the space of a few weeks, part of everyday life for people across the world. Students use it to study, doctors use it to draft notes, lawyers use it to review documents, and institutions that had been watching AI from a distance, governments, regulators, school boards, hospitals, suddenly find themselves trying to catch up to something that has already arrived. By 2025, that process of catching up is still underway. AI systems are now writing software, composing music, assisting in medical diagnosis, generating visual content, and informing financial decisions at a scale that would have seemed implausible a decade ago. Governments are working to establish regulatory frameworks for a technology that evolves faster than legislation can follow. Researchers who spent decades in relative obscurity are now advising heads of state, testifying before legislatures, and debating publicly about the long-term implications of systems they themselves do not fully understand. The scientists who gathered at Dartmouth in 1956 set out to answer a question about intelligence. 70 years later, the systems they inspired are reshaping medicine, education, law, national security, and the nature of work itself. It is, by any honest measure, one of the most consequential technological developments in human history, and the question Alan Turing asked in 1950, quiet, precise, almost innocent, is no longer theoretical. The machines are thinking. The harder question, the one we are only beginning to seriously ask, is what we intend to do about it.